Hey everyone, welcome to our I think it's our 26th episode of Brew Talk with Mr.Beer. Now I'm losing track because I don't think I updated my notes. 20-something episode of Brew Talk with Mr.Beer. My name's Robert. I got Ashley back again with me this week. We appreciate you taking the time to join us and watch us today. Before we dive into our topic, let's talk about what we're drinking. What do you got that looks really good?
I am drinking a gluten-free European Pilsner, which actually turned out really good. I'm very happy with it.
Did you share it in the Facebook group?
I did share a picture of it.
There you go. See, that's what you guys do in the Facebook group. I am drinking a mystery beer. I couldn't figure out what it was. We have bottles floating around the office
it's
like
a brown
crazy.
One.
So I thought it was an American lager, but it's a little dark. I think it might be our American ale. I'm not so sure on that, but it's really good. So, that's the good part working here is you can just walk anywhere and find beer bottles galore. Mm-hmm. Just take one for your picking. Okay, enough of that nonsense. Let's dive into our topic today. Is basically common off flavors and kind of how you can fix them, prevent them, stuff like that. If you are new to brewing beer, have been brewing for a long time, you're just bound to get some type of off flavors in your beer at some point. It just happens. So you can take all the precautions you want. You can sanitize. You can do this and that. But every once in a while, you just get that one beer where you're just like, oh man, that tastes really bad. So no one is immune to brewing off flavors. So we want to kind of discuss some of the more popular ones that people will taste. I think this will be beneficial for a lot of new brewers that are starting, and also a lot of guys that have been brewing for a long time to kind of just give you that refresher that you are invincible. You're not invincible. That things will happen.
Yes.
Things will happen to you. All right, so let's talk about our first flavor. I will have fun pronouncing these, and Ashley will laugh at me. We will discuss
Acetaldehyde.
I was going to call it acetaldehyde, which I don't even know what that is. Which seems to be kind of the most popular off flavor that people will kind of describe but don't know what they have.
Exactly, especially with extract beer. So as Robert said, this is probably one of the most common off flavors that you hear about in home brewing. It's usually described as like green apple or cidery, or in really extreme cases, sometimes rotting apple, which is pretty gross. Yeah. Sometimes people call it twangy too, just depending on how you perceive it. Acetaldehyde is something that occurs naturally in every brewing process. It's a chemical byproduct of yeast. In the best circumstances, usually the yeast consumes it again and it's converted to ethanol alcohol. So that would be a good thing. Yeah. In some cases where your starting gravity is very, very high, you can have a higher occurrence of acetaldehyde because the yeast can get kind of exhausted and then they can't clean up after themselves. You can also get it if you are coming out of the gate in your fermentation too cold or too hot. Okay. So you'll see this a lot like with wheat beer yeast, for example, because they do naturally produce a lot of that byproduct, but usually it is then later consumed. Okay. So usually, not always, if it's not something infection related, it's going to have something to do with temperature and or yeast health.
And then sometimes giving it a little bit of age can sometimes clean off this flavor a little bit.
Exactly. So the fix to that would be check your brewing temperatures and then also longer conditioning times, because more often than not, when you're conditioning, you're doing it at a little bit warmer temperature, and that gives the yeast the metabolic ability to kind of go through and clean up after itself.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. So second flavor, I can pronounce Diacetyl.
That you did it great. Yes. Diacetyl, yeah. So basically this one can be kind of tough to relate to brewers who have never experienced it before. Yeah. But it's sort of one of those things that once you get it, you know it. It's hard to ignore. It usually comes across as butterscotch or like buttered popcorn. Yeah. Okay. Diacetyl is another compound that is produced through fermentation by yeast. Again, it's usually reconsumed by the yeast, and so it's not perceptible on the palate anymore. The butter flavor can have a few causes. Weak or mutated yeast, that can be one of them. Again, that goes back to pitching temperature and things like that. And also brewing temperatures. Over or under oxygenating, extended fermentation temps, extended low fermentation temps, which is actually one of the reasons why I brought a lager today, and weak or short boils. The other cause of the butter flavor in your beer can be from old, outdated, high alpha hops, and we call this hop creep, which you've heard me mention a couple of times. It is creepy and very unpleasant. So the way that you can kind of avoid hop creep or the diacetyl flavor in your beer is not rushing fermentation times, for one, because you got to give it time to kind of clean up after itself. And then also making sure that the hops that you use are fresh.
Yeah.
If you have an open packet laying around and you're like, I think I kind of want to dry hop with this. My advice is don't.
No.
Yes, don't.
Don't
No,
do it.
squirt.
So I think it goes down, these last 2 points, follow the instructions.
Yes.
Because if you follow the instructions, it covers all this to prevent these flavors. That's why we write them the way we write them. So the temperatures are set the way they're set.
Yes.
We're preventing off flavors from ruining your brewing experience, which is no fun. All right, another off flavor that brewers get.
And when we say stir vigorously, we mean it because
Vigorously.
that yeast needs oxygen.
Vigorously.
Mm-hmm.
Fun words today. It's another off flavor that people get. They may enjoy it in their Corona, but it's that skunky flavor that you don't want in all your home brews.
Yes, so that's a really interesting one because that's probably one of the only off flavors that people widely will accept and actually enjoy.
Yeah.
It's become a benchmark of many beer brands that people consume regularly and like a lot. It's usually described as like skunky or catty. Sometimes like rubber, again in extreme cases. This comes from hops being exposed to UV light. We can call that Lightstruck, call it, UV exposure, but skunked is what you hear the most. Yep. And what happens is when the hops are exposed to light, they react with the hydrogen sulfide that the yeast produce. They create a chemical, and here's where I'm going to say it weird, mercaptan. And that's actually the same chemical that skunks produce in their scent glands.
All right.
Yeah.
Fun stuff. Yeah. And basically,
and then to protect your beer from being light struck, obviously it's pretty self-explanatory. Keep it out of the light.
Yes.
So avoid using green or clear bottles. If you do find yourself using them, make sure that you're covering your bottles up if they're not like in the fridge or somewhere that's completely dark.
Yeah, throw a blanket over those things. You will greatly appreciate it. Another flavor that I think a lot of new brewers get, especially like when they're bottling, they're transferring, doing certain things, is oxidation.
Yes, paper in your beer is usually what that tastes like, or wet cardboard. Like if you've ever, walked into your garage after it's rained and you can smell wet cardboard or something along those lines, you're going to get that in your beer. And it's kind of gross. It's caused by oxidization, over aeration at the wrong time, the wrong point in the fermentation process. Oxidation occurs mostly when excessive amounts of oxygen are introduced into the wort when it's still very hot or warm. So you want to avoid being too rough with it when it's in its very hot state. But also aerating your wort before pitching can cause it too, under aerating your wort before pitching can cause it too. So basically, to prevent that off flavor, you're going to want to make sure that you're aerating your wort when it is in its cooled state, and that when after it's been fermented, that you're not being too rough during your transfers and not leaving a whole lot of headspace in your bottles.
And that's one reason why we don't do a lot of transferring and racking with how the Mr.Beer system is set up, because all you're doing is opening up more risk for infection and oxidation issues, which just ruins your day again.
It really does.
Man. All right, so a sour flavor. Now I love sour beers, but you don't want sour in all your beers. Sour flavor can definitely ruin certain beers. Absolutely.
So this is usually described as like vinegar or an acrid flavor, except in sours like he just mentioned. This is generally a pretty sure sign of infection. Usually bacterial, it could be even wild yeast. It's very disappointing when it happens. It really is a weak ruiner, but it does happen because keep in mind, pathogens fly through the air. Things happen that are on a microscopic level that you can't see. So if it does happen to you, try not to get too upset about it. Slow down a little bit. Think about your sanitization process. Think about the environment in which you're actually putting your beer together, because like I said a second ago, things fly through the air. I mean, how do most of us get sick? Through airborne pathogens. Your beer can get sick much in the same way. So sanitation, be aware of your environment, handle it very cleanly and carefully. And so you go to any brewery, it's always very, very clean. Everything is spotless and clean. Yes, and if you are not clean, you usually get yelled at. So that's for a very good reason. They definitely know. So the last one we'll dive into is just kind of that sweet taste that people can get in their beer. So more often than not, if you're tasting your beer at, say, day 10 or 14, or whenever it's slated to be done, and you're getting a lot of cloying residual sweetness, then more than likely your beer is under fermented. Basically what that's indicative of is a fermentation stall. Okay, so if your beer's been fermenting along and then something happens, fermentation ceases, residual sugar remains in the beer. Now, there are some cases where we have recipes, especially that are formulated with much sweeter malts.
Yep.
So you may get a little residual sweetness, but we're talking more of a sugar-based sweetness. Yeah. The way that you're going to prevent that is by making sure that when you start your beer, especially those higher gravity beers, that you're maybe adding some nutrient, paying really close attention to your temperatures, making sure they're not getting too low or too high and killing off the yeast. But yeah, basically under fermentation, preventing it comes down to a lot of temperature management and just yeast management in general, making sure they're healthy and happy.
Yeah, so I think a good recap is clean.
Yes.
Clean, follow the instructions, hold your temps. You should be good to go, and take your time. Don't rush your brewing process. I mean, we make it simple to brew with Mr.Beer, but still take your time. And
trust your process. We spend a lot of hours putting these processes together because we've tested them and we know they work.
Yes, definitely. All right, so we're going to wrap it up for today. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the show, learned something. I know I learned a lot. I assume you guys learned a lot as well. So give us a like, a thumbs up, subscribe, share, whatever you feel like doing on whatever social platform you are. Please do it. We do post all these on our blog page at mrbeer.com/blog, and also read about it on there. We got a YouTube page and our Facebook page and our Instagram page if time permits, depending on how long we film, because we like to talk a lot sometimes.
We do, especially me.
That's okay though. Well, we're giving good information, so it's helpful and people like it. Also, if you want to learn more about Mr.Beer, see cool pictures of beer that we're brewing, see cool pictures of our customers' beer, they post all kinds of cool pictures in there. We're like almost 550 people now, so we're going to get there. You guys got to keep joining. Mr. Beer's Brewing Society, our Facebook group. Go to Facebook, search Mr. Beer's Brewing Society. Go to our Facebook page, go down to groups, click join. Answer the 3 questions, we'll let you join. If you are interested in learning about brewing in general, not sure, want to hop in the group, just let us know you're new and you want to learn more about beer, and we'll let you in because we're all about welcoming new people that want to learn and that want to brew with Mr. Beer. So yeah, it's a fun place to hang out. Enjoy. So we will wrap it up. We'll see you guys next week, and cheers, guys. Happy brewing.